What if the most challenging conversations at work, ones we typically avoid, could actually be the key to stronger relationships and better performance? In Radical Candor, leadership coach Kim Scott introduces a radical approach built on two pillars: care personally and challenge directly. These principles aren't about being nice or harsh, they're about being genuinely human, honest, and clear. Whether you're managing a team, working alongside peers, or aspiring to lead, this book shows how honest feedback and genuine respect can drive trust, growth, and innovation. Through compelling stories, real-world examples, and Scott's practical framework, you'll discover how to give praise, deliver tough feedback, and create a culture where people feel seen and push one another to excel. In this video from Detailed Book Summaries, we'll break down the core ideas of Radical Candor, why empathy without honesty fails, why blunt feedback without empathy blows up, and how you navigate the middle to become the kind of leader people actually want to follow. If you're ready to improve communication, build a team that thrives on feedback, and grow as a leader, and you're looking for practical tools you can apply right now, hit like, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you never miss our next deep dive into transformative books.
Chapter 1. A New Way to Lead. What is Radical Candor? Kim Scott begins Radical Candor by challenging everything we commonly believe about leadership and communication. She explains that many bosses fall into two damaging traps. Either they are too aggressive, pushing hard without showing they care, or they are too passive, avoiding difficult conversations to spare feelings. The ideal leadership style, she argues, lies in the balance between these extremes, what she calls radical candor. Radical candor is the ability to care personally, while also challenging directly. It means being honest and clear in your feedback, but always grounded in genuine concern for the people you lead. Scott draws on her experience working at companies like Google and Apple, sharing stories where she initially failed to communicate effectively and later discovered how powerful radical candor could be. When practiced well, it builds trust, strengthens relationships, and drives performance. But radical candor goes beyond feedback. It's a philosophy about building meaningful relationships in the workplace by seeing employees as humans, not just workers. It requires listening attentively, being vulnerable yourself, and creating a culture where people feel safe to speak openly, learn from mistakes, and push their limits. Scott warns about two common pitfalls. On one side is obnoxious aggression, where a leader challenges directly but fails to show care. Such bosses might deliver harsh truths but come off as mean-spirited, causing fear and resentment rather than respect. On the other side is ruinous empathy, where leaders care deeply but avoid giving tough feedback, which enables underperformance and festering problems. A fourth, more toxic behavior she identifies as manipulative insincerity, where neither care nor honesty exists, and people engage in political games or false friendliness, which corrodes trust and morale. To be a truly effective leader, a kick-ass boss who keeps their humanity, one must embrace radical candor by balancing personal care with direct challenge. This demands courage, self-awareness, and consistent practice. Scott encourages leaders to start small by having sincere conversations, asking questions, and giving clear but compassionate feedback. Through observing responses and adapting, trust gradually grows. She also emphasizes that radical candor must flow both ways. Leaders should invite feedback from their teams as much as they give it, fostering transparency and collective growth. Ultimately, radical candor isn't a quick management trick. It's a fundamental mindset shift that transforms how leaders interact with their teams and how teams perform. Leadership isn't about perfection but about authenticity, showing care, speaking honestly, and nurturing people's potential. As readers reflect on their own workplaces, Scott's message invites them to consider where their managers and colleagues fall on the radical candor spectrum, and imagine the positive changes radical candor could bring. Chapter 2. Relationships are the foundation, building trust and connection. Kim Scott dives into why relationships form the bedrock of effective leadership and radical candor. Without trust and genuine connection, feedback, even when well-intentioned, falls flat or worse, backfires. Leaders who master relationships create environments where honest conversations aren't scary, but expected and welcomed. At its core, radical candor depends on two simple but powerful human truths. People work best when they feel cared for as individuals, and they grow when challenged to improve. Building this delicate balance starts with establishing trust, showing up consistently, being reliable, and demonstrating that you see your team members as more than just cogs in the machine. Scott explains that relationship building is not some fluffy HR exercise, but a strategic leadership imperative. When people trust their manager, they're more open to receiving tough feedback and less likely to react defensively. Trust lowers barriers, encourages risk-taking, and cultivates a culture where everyone pushes each other to be better. She highlights practical ways leaders can nurture relationships. One is simply spending time, informal chats, one-on-one meetings, or even shared lunches. These moments create openings for vulnerability and understanding that form the foundation of radical candor. It's about learning what motivates each person, their fears, ambitions, and challenges. Importantly, Scott emphasizes that building relationships is a two-way street. Leaders must also be willing to be vulnerable, share their own struggles, and invite feedback. This humility humanizes the boss and sets the tone for open dialogue. The chapter also tackles common obstacles to relationship building: busy schedules, remote work, or cultural differences. Scott urges leaders to prioritize connection despite these challenges, because relationship deficits create toxic environments where miscommunication and resentment thrive. Through real-life examples, she shows how investing in relationships transformed struggling teams into thriving ones. Leaders who took the time to listen deeply and care personally could challenge directly without alienating, and their teams responded with loyalty and higher performance. Scott closes by stressing that radical candor is less about a single feedback moment and more about a continuous, evolving relationship. When leaders commit to building trust first, their direct challenges carry weight and drive meaningful growth. In short, this chapter makes clear: you can't rush radical candor without relationships. Invest in connection, show you care, and the tough conversations will follow, naturally, effectively, and humanely. Chapter 3: Get, Give, and Encourage Guidance, Mastering the Art of Feedback. In this chapter, Kim Scott zeroes in on feedback, the lifeblood of radical candor, and why getting it right is so essential for personal and team growth. She argues that feedback isn't just a one-way street where bosses lecture employees or sporadically hand out reviews. Instead, it's an ongoing dialogue rooted in trust and mutual respect, where both giving and receiving guidance become natural habits. Scott stresses that most people fear feedback because it's often delivered poorly, too vague, too harsh, or withheld altogether. Radical candor demands a different approach, one that's clear, specific, kind, and timely. When done well, feedback accelerates learning, corrects course quickly, and strengthens relationships rather than tearing them down. She breaks down feedback into two essential types: praise and criticism. Both must be given generously and thoughtfully. Praise should be sincere and specific, not generic or superficial. It must highlight exactly what behavior or outcome deserves recognition to reinforce positive habits. Conversely, criticism should challenge directly but with care, focusing on actions or results rather than personal attacks. Scott also highlights the importance of encouraging feedback from others, especially from your team. Leaders must invite feedback on their own performance openly and listen without defensiveness. This models vulnerability and creates a culture where people feel safe to speak up and share honest opinions. To make feedback effective, timing and context matter. Scott advises giving it soon after an event while emotions aren't running high. Public praise can boost morale, but critical feedback is best done privately to avoid embarrassment and foster trust. The chapter also dives into practical tactics for delivering feedback with radical candor, such as asking questions first to understand perspectives, focusing on impact, and avoiding blame. Scott warns against two extremes that sabotage feedback: obnoxious aggression, where criticism is blunt and uncaring, and ruinous empathy, where criticism is sugar-coated or withheld, leading to stagnation. One key takeaway is the power of the I statement, speaking from your own observations and feelings to avoid making assumptions or accusations. For example, I noticed that the report was late and it caused delays in the project, rather than you're always late with your work. Scott shares compelling stories where feedback transformed performance and morale when delivered with radical candor, underscoring how this skill can change the trajectory of careers and organizations. By mastering how to get, give, and encourage guidance, leaders foster an environment of continuous improvement. Feedback becomes less about judgment and more about care and growth, the true essence of radical candor. Chapter 4: Understand what motivates each person. Leading with empathy and insight. In Chapter 4, Kim Scott shifts the focus to motivation, a crucial piece in the puzzle of effective leadership and radical candor. She points out that no two people are motivated by the same things, and understanding these differences is key to helping your team thrive. Leadership isn't about applying a one-size-fits-all approach. It's about seeing each individual as unique and adapting your style to unlock their full potential. Scott explains that motivation goes beyond simple rewards like money or promotions. It's deeply personal and often tied to what people value most. Whether it's autonomy, mastery, purpose, recognition, or the desire to contribute meaningfully. When leaders take time to discover what truly drives each person, they can tailor feedback, challenges, and support in ways that resonate profoundly. To uncover motivation, Scott encourages leaders to ask thoughtful, open-ended questions. Instead of assuming what matters to someone, have candid conversations about their goals, fears, and what brings them satisfaction at work. These dialogues build trust and show that you care about them as whole people, not just as workers. The chapter also tackles the challenge of managing different motivations within a team. Scott stresses that great leaders don't try to force everyone into the same mold, but find ways to align individual motivations with team and organizational goals. This alignment fuels engagement and encourages people to stretch themselves in ways that feel meaningful. Another important insight is recognizing how motivation can change over time. What drives a person early in their career may evolve as they grow, face new challenges, or experience life changes. Leaders must stay attentive and adaptable, continuously checking in to recalibrate their approach. Scott illustrates these concepts with real-world examples where understanding motivation led to breakthroughs. One leader's ability to connect an employee's love of learning with new project opportunities sparked a level of creativity and commitment that transformed the team's results. Finally, the chapter emphasizes empathy as the cornerstone of understanding motivation. It's about stepping into others' shoes, listening deeply, and responding with genuine care. This empathy strengthens relationships and makes radical candor not just a feedback technique, but a holistic leadership philosophy. In essence, Chapter 4 teaches that to lead effectively, you must go beyond managing tasks and start managing people's hearts and minds. By understanding what motivates each person, you create an environment where radical candor can flourish naturally, because people feel seen, valued, and inspired to grow. Chapter 5. Drive results collaboratively, building a culture of team success. In Chapter 5, Kim Scott dives into the art of driving results while nurturing collaboration and trust, a balancing act every leader must master. She emphasizes that success isn't just about individual brilliance or barking orders from the top. It's about creating an environment where teams can thrive together and produce their best work. Scott points out that while radical candor focuses heavily on honest communication and caring personally, it ultimately serves one powerful purpose: achieving outstanding results. Without results, even the kindest feedback and best intentions fall flat. So leaders must keep their eyes on the prize while fostering a culture that encourages accountability, ownership, and mutual support. One of the chapter's core lessons is that collaboration is more than just working alongside others. It's about actively inviting diverse perspectives, creating psychological safety for people to speak up, and leveraging everyone's strengths to solve problems. Scott stresses that this kind of teamwork requires leaders to be both confident and humble. Confident enough to guide the team's direction and humble enough to admit they don't have all the answers. Scott also tackles the challenge of navigating conflicts and disagreements, which are inevitable in any team setting. She explains that radical candor provides the tools to address these tensions openly and respectfully, turning potential flashpoints into opportunities for growth and innovation. Instead of avoiding difficult conversations or resorting to passive aggressiveness, teams learn to debate ideas passionately, but with empathy and mutual respect. The chapter also highlights the importance of setting clear goals and expectations. Without clarity, teams can flounder, waste time, and lose motivation. Leaders must communicate what success looks like in measurable terms and regularly check progress without micromanaging, empowering the team while holding them accountable. Another key insight is celebrating wins, both big and small. Recognizing achievements not only boosts morale but reinforces the behaviors and mindsets that lead to success. Scott reminds us that genuine praise, specific and heartfelt, is a vital tool in building a culture of continuous improvement. Scott shares vivid examples of leaders who transformed their teams by fostering collaboration and driving results through radical candor. These stories show that when teams feel heard, supported, and challenged in the right way, they deliver extraordinary outcomes. In summary, Chapter 5 teaches that results and relationships aren't at odds, they're deeply intertwined. By leading with radical candor, you build a team culture where people are motivated, aligned, and equipped to reach ambitious goals together. It's about creating a workplace where honesty and care fuel both individual growth and collective achievement. Chapter 6. Embrace growth and learning, cultivating a culture that never settles. In Chapter 6, Kim Scott focuses on the vital role that a growth mindset and continuous learning play in building high-performing teams. She highlights that radical candor isn't a one-time fix but an ongoing practice rooted in curiosity, humility, and the willingness to improve, both as leaders and as teams. Scott explains that embracing growth means rejecting complacency. It's about acknowledging that no matter how much success you've achieved, there is always room to learn more, get better, and tackle new challenges. This mindset creates an environment where feedback isn't feared or ignored, but welcomed as a crucial tool for development. One key message is that leaders must model vulnerability by openly sharing their own growth areas and mistakes. When bosses admit they don't have all the answers and show they're actively learning, it gives everyone permission to do the same. This lowers barriers and builds trust, turning feedback from a chore into a natural part of daily interactions. The chapter also stresses the importance of creating safe spaces for experimentation and risk-taking. Scott points out that innovation and improvement come from trying new things and occasionally failing. Leaders who punish failure create fear and silence, while those who encourage learning from mistakes foster creativity and resilience. Scott introduces practical strategies to embed growth into the culture, such as regular check-ins focused not just on results but on learning progress, offering targeted coaching, and encouraging team members to set personal development goals alongside their work objectives. This approach helps individuals see feedback and growth as integrated parts of their roles, not separate or punitive processes. Another vital insight is recognizing diverse learning styles and tailoring your approach. Some people thrive on direct feedback, others on storytelling or reflection. Effective leaders pay attention to these differences and adapt their communication to maximize impact. The chapter closes with stories of teams that transformed their dynamics by adopting a growth mindset. These examples show how radical candor can shift a culture from rigid and fearful to open, energized, and forward-looking. In essence, Chapter 6 teaches that fostering continuous learning is the engine that drives sustained success. Radical candor creates the conditions for growth by making feedback a caring, courageous conversation, one that empowers people to stretch, evolve, and achieve more than they thought possible. Chapter 7 Build a culture of guidance, making feedback a habit, not a hassle. In Chapter 7, Kim Scott zooms in on a foundational element of radical candor, making feedback an everyday, natural part of how teams operate. She argues that feedback shouldn't be a dreaded annual review or an occasional awkward conversation. Instead, it must become a constant, effortless rhythm that fuels growth, clarity, and trust. Scott begins by acknowledging a hard truth. Many workplaces avoid feedback because it feels risky, uncomfortable, or time-consuming. But avoiding feedback comes at a steep cost. Misunderstandings fester, mistakes repeat, and people stagnate. To overcome this, leaders need to normalize candid conversations and make giving and receiving feedback something people expect and even appreciate. A core concept Scott introduces is the idea of guidance, which goes beyond just pointing out problems. Guidance is about offering advice, encouragement, and constructive criticism in ways that help people improve without demoralizing them. It's an act of care, not cruelty. The chapter breaks down practical tactics for embedding feedback into daily interactions. One is to create a culture where feedback is frequent and informal, quick check-ins. How did that go? Questions or simple "here's what I noticed" moments. These small doses keep communication flowing and prevent issues from growing. Scott also highlights the power of soliciting feedback proactively. When leaders ask, "What can I do better?" or "How can I support you more effectively?" they model humility and openness. This invites team members to share honest thoughts without fear. Importantly, The chapter addresses the delicate balance between praise and criticism. Radical candor encourages specific, sincere praise as much as candid criticism, because recognition motivates and reinforces positive behaviors. Vague compliments, Scott warns, don't cut it. The praise must be clear about what exactly was great and why it mattered. Scott offers tips for receiving feedback gracefully too. Leaders should listen without interrupting or defending, show appreciation for the input, and reflect on how to act on it. This sets a tone that feedback is valuable and not a personal attack. The chapter closes by reinforcing that building a culture of guidance takes time and intentionality. It requires patience, practice, and persistence, but the payoff is huge. Teams that communicate openly, solve problems faster, and feel genuinely supported. In summary, Chapter 7 drives home that feedback is the lifeblood of growth, and radical candor is the framework that transforms feedback from a burden into a gift. When guidance becomes habit, everyone wins. Chapter 8. Drive results without losing your humanity. Balancing toughness and compassion. Chapter 8 tackles one of the toughest challenges leaders face: how to deliver results while staying human. Kim Scott zeroes in on the idea that being a kick-ass boss isn't about barking orders or being harsh. It's about balancing high standards and accountability with genuine care and respect for the people who make those results happen. Scott explains that many leaders fall into the trap of either being too soft, letting things slide and avoiding hard conversations, or too harsh, pushing for results at the expense of morale and trust. Radical candor offers a way out of this false choice. It shows how you can challenge directly while caring personally, holding people to their best without breaking their spirit. The chapter outlines how leaders can create a culture of accountability where expectations are crystal clear, progress is tracked, and feedback flows both ways. People know what success looks like, what's at stake, and how they're contributing. But at the same time, the environment feels supportive, where mistakes are seen as learning moments, not failures to punish. Scott emphasizes that tough conversations about missed targets, difficult behaviors, or strategic pivots don't have to be brutal. When delivered with radical candor, these conversations build trust because they come from a place of respect and a desire to help the other person improve. One key insight is that the person and the performance are separate. You can care deeply about someone as a human being while being brutally honest about the work. Scott encourages leaders to name this distinction explicitly, so feedback is framed as a gift aimed at growth, not a personal attack. The chapter also dives into the importance of managing your own emotions as a leader. Staying calm, clear-headed, and empathetic during tough talks models the behavior you want to see. It prevents escalation and helps keep the focus on solutions. Scott shares practical advice on how to deliver hard feedback effectively. Start by acknowledging the person's strengths, be specific about what needs to change, explain the impact of the behavior, and invite collaboration on the next steps. This formula helps keep difficult conversations constructive and forward-looking. Lastly, the chapter highlights the ripple effect of leaders who balance toughness with compassion. When employees feel both challenged and cared for, engagement soars, creativity flourishes, and results improve. It's the sweet spot where humanity meets high performance. In sum, Chapter 8 redefines what it means to be a great boss. Not just a driver of results, but a compassionate coach who pushes people to be their best without losing sight of their dignity. Chapter 9. Understand what motivates each person. Unlocking individual drive. Chapter 9 dives deep into the critical skill of understanding what truly motivates the people on your team. Kim Scott argues that one-size-fits-all management doesn't work. To lead effectively, you must get curious about each individual's unique drivers, aspirations, and fears. Scott begins by pointing out a common mistake. Many managers assume that money, promotions, or status are the main motivators for everyone. But motivation is deeply personal and varies wildly from person to person. Some thrive on recognition, others on autonomy, purpose, or mastering a skill. Without tuning into these nuances, efforts to motivate can fall flat or even backfire. This chapter encourages leaders to have open, empathetic conversations about motivation. Ask questions like, what excites you about your work? Or what's important to you in your career? These discussions help reveal what makes people tick and build stronger relationships. Scott emphasizes that motivation isn't static. It can shift over time with life changes, new challenges, or evolving priorities. That means leaders must keep checking in and adapting their approach. Understanding motivation also means recognizing what drains energy or causes disengagement. Are there roadblocks, mismatches in role or values, or unaddressed frustrations? Radical Candor helps uncover these issues before they silently erode performance and morale. The chapter offers concrete strategies for aligning work with motivation, tailoring responsibilities, offering growth opportunities, adjusting feedback styles, and celebrating milestones that matter personally. When people feel seen and supported in what drives them, their engagement and productivity soar. Scott also discusses the role of intrinsic versus extrinsic motivators. While bonuses and perks can boost short-term effort, intrinsic motivators like meaningful work and mastery have longer-lasting impact. Leaders who tap into intrinsic motivation create teams that sustain high performance and satisfaction. Finally, Scott stresses the importance of balancing individual motivations with the team's needs. Great leaders find ways to harmonize personal drives with organizational goals, fostering a culture where everyone's contributions feel purposeful and valued. In essence, Chapter 9 shows that leadership isn't just about managing tasks, it's about connecting with people at a human level. When you understand what motivates each person, you unlock their full potential and create a thriving, motivated team.